Pablo, you have devoted your life to truth, to beauty, and to peace.
Bach cello suites are so fiendishly difficult to play, even if you have more than a schoolboy technique. Casals discovered the suites in a Barcelona music store, and he made them his own. He practiced every morning before breakfast. He played one before breakfast. He said it sanctified the house. Cellists ever since have been struggling to get it right.
I don't think that the Bach suites alone were the reason for his enormous artistic success. I think that every time he put the bow on the cello, he had something to say that people understood. It was speech as pure and simple as poetry.
You see, one has to follow the line of the music.
His magic was touching something very profound in the music. It was giving life to all of that, and he could transmit that life. Even when he was 95, 96, you can see rehearsals, clips of rehearsals that have been done, whereupon he arrives on the podium very slowly, and all of a sudden there's all that energy that exuded. And that was Casals, so you can imagine when he was 20 or 30, I wish I would have been around to see it.
first thing that strikes you when you begin to work on a biography of Casals is the immense chronological span of his life. Casals was born in 1876. That's a good while before the motor car was invented, and he died 97 years later, 4 years after man walked on the moon. Again, Casals at 23 played for Queen Victoria at Osborne. At age 85, he played for John F. Kennedy at the White House. That seems to me an enormous chronological time span to take into account.
I have played that hundreds of times, and every time I'm so moved, because with it comes all the tragedy of my country, Catalonia. So then I said, no more. I don't play anymore. You see, when you see such a horrible thing, such misery, such suffering, you can't think of in music or in concerts. So this is why I dedicated my time and my everything to those people. I think that if I have done one thing in my life well, it was that.
By 1936, Casals was a world-famous cello virtuoso. He was a widely known conductor. He was an outspoken Republican. Some people still in Spain have not forgiven him for not being a monarchist, because he had the patronage of the royal family when he was 18. But he was all these things. The war came, and he wanted to be in Spain with his people, despite all the horrors. He was prevailed on to continue his concert career because the politicians and others said, you can get our message out much better if you will play and speak.
the situation was so sad, so sad. I was a neurasthenic, got a neurasthenia in Paris. I was more than 1 month, everything closed. I didn't want to see the light. See, I was was a wreck. Very well, one day came a friend of mine, a Catalan, and said, please, but please, come to Catalonia. I said, Catalonia? What do you mean, Catalonia? Yes, Catalonia, French Catalonia. And this is why I came to Prades.
I think one thing to remember about Casals is that he had lived a considerable life even before he left Spain. He was, after all, over 60. He didn't expect or invite exile, but it did give him a colossal new phase of his life, which was not all painful. He came with Senora Capdevila, one of his former pupils, a widow who had been entrusted to his safekeeping in a way, and who had lived on his estate in San Salvador during the 1930s. It was a very serious and a very deep relationship, and a very close one. And it is noticeable that the only occasion on which Casals returned to Spain after exile in 1939 was to bury Senora Capdevila, whom he had married on her deathbed, and then took back to San Salvador to bury her next to his mother. That was a major statement of affection.
In the south of France, beneath snow-capped Pyrenees which bar the road to Spain, stands the ancient village of Prades. Since 1945, Prades has become a place of pilgrimage for musicians and music lovers from all over the world. They come here to visit and to study with the foremost cellist of our era, the great Spanish artist living in self-imposed exile, Pablo Casals.
Donc c'est là où il se couchait?
Oui, ici, là, sa chambre. Et là, c'est la
toi?
chambre de Madame Casals. Et là, c'est là où il donnait les leçons.
Oui.
petite ville française de Prades, au pied du Canigou, est actuellement le centre musical du monde entier. Le grand violoncelliste espagnol Pablo Casals, qui réside à Prades depuis 12 ans, y dirige un festival Jean-Sébastien Bach en l'honneur du 2e centenaire de la mort du grand musicien de Leipzig.
Alexander Schneider, who had come to study the Bach suites with him, the partitas, had asked him to come to make records for Columbia Records in New York. And he had refused in spite of a wonderful offer from Columbia Records. And Schneider's idea was then to say, well, if you won't come to America, we'll bring America to you. We'll start a festival here in Prague. And that's how it all started.
I visited him in 48 first. Then I started with him in 49 and cooked for him too, because I'm professionally a cook. I just play a little bit to make money, you know, to cook. 14th of July, I came for dinner in Prades with Madame Capdevila, you know, who was his friend, who was really devoted to him. And after dinner, I asked him again, why don't you come to America? We all want you there. He said, no. So long as you recognize Franco, I am not going to. I don't go anywhere where Franco is recognized. So I said, how would that be? There's 200 years of the birth of Bach. To have a Bach festival, we all come to you. He looked at me, and started laughing. He said, well, this little boy, he's not going to take it serious. He said, all right, I promise you I will do it. Shook hands, and that's how it happened.
Rico avait son bureau ici du festival. Alors, bon, c'était le centre, si vous voulez. C'était noir de monde partout, les rues, les cafés, les restaurants. Il y avait un monde fou. On avait été envahis. On n'avait jamais vu une chose pareille, disons, à Prades.
Nous voyons ici cette photo qui est, à mon sens, merveilleuse, géniale polichinelle. On dirait vraiment un homme polichinelle, et puis qui tout d'un coup rebondit pour, maniant la baguette et l'oreille, pour alors s'élancer pour vraiment posséder sa musique et son orchestre. Tout ce sont des photos, c'est mon grand-père Alexandre. Toutes ces photos représentent une sorte de rétrospective des premières années du festival.
I was involved with arranging the whole festival, and I felt, especially here, you know, you feel really that you go up to heaven, not to, to hell, you know. Anyway, that's the feeling I had, something extraordinarily beautiful here. Very, and I must say, everybody who was involved in the Casals Festival felt from his soul something, a relation. We all cried. We were really human beings here. I shall play The Song of the Birds by Pablo Casals in his good memory.
We need liberty. We want to do our best in everything. So my neighbor, my friend, must have the same feeling that I have. This is why the wars are such a devilish thing. We see your government says, go and kill. Well, you don't want to kill anybody when you have to go. It's terrible, it's horrible. And this is why I don't conceive a country with a dictator. I am a simple man. I don't like complications. The same in music. I like what is natural, to give what the music demands, and I try to do my best. The same in life. And for me, this is civilization.
For me, he was the most honest musician I had ever known. And his way of making music was, for me, the only way.
Playing with Casals was an extraordinary musical experience. He always reminded me of a jeweler, meticulous and precise and looking for the tiniest little elements. And that is the way a musical interpretation is built up. You have to envision the grand, the complete, the global, as it were. You have to see the great lines. You have to see the whole structure. But then, when you are putting it together, you have to be aware of the smallest details.
It was all from here. And physically. For example, he would say to the chair, move! Don't sit like that, straight like that, you know, like mummies. He hated that. He felt, which you see, music is a physical expression. And even I remember Schnabel, a great pianist, he would say to somebody playing, he said, move, he said, or make a crescendo, or make pianissimo. So the piano would say, I can't do it because the piano is mechanical. You have to do it, even if he doesn't do it. Very important. In other words, if the instrument doesn't do it, you have to still do it. Today, well, very few of them do that.
There's a beautiful phrase in the C major Beethoven sonata for cello and piano. And I couldn't do exactly what he wanted. And finally he said, you know, in the fall, the leaves fall off the trees, but they don't fall straight down. They fall with a gentle, caressing motion to the ground. Now you must make your phrase sound like that. And immediately it opened a picture for me of how he wanted that phrase to sound.
Finished, huh? Rainbow, 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 rainbow. All the music is a rainbow.
It was amazing to me how he was able to play that instrument, because it was reluctant, for me at least, it was reluctant to give out the sound that I wanted, and he used gut strings. Of course, in modern times, we use steel on the A and D. He was still using gut, and they would be frayed and ready to break. But the sound he got out of that instrument was something incredible. And he would smoke his pipe. He had one of those curved pipes. And I say he smoked his pipe. He smoked matches. And every once in a while, he'd forget and drop the match, and it would always wind up in the F-hole of the cello. And I'm sure there must have been about at least a half a kilo of matches down at the bottom of the cello. Didn't affect the sound, but every time he picked the cello up and shook it, I could hear matches rolling around from the bottom of the instrument.
You understand? Yes. You understand? Very well. Well done. Very well. Bum, 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 bum.
Age of 2, the Casals family came to this beach on holiday. Every summer they came, every September they spent here. So his earliest memories were of this house. And when he became a wealthy man, he began to construct the house, which we see here. It's as if he wanted to establish something physical in this country, perhaps sensing that he wouldn't always be able to be here. This cello, this was his first, was it?
This was his real professional cello, the one that he started his serious study. He must have been 9, 10.
It's a small instrument.
It's a very small instrument and very sweet. And he played it for 2 or 3 years. We have seen photographs of him when he played at the Café Tos and all. Photographs with other musicians, but never playing this instrument, which is curious.
It's about that time that he discovered these.
It was a little later when he discovered these in an old music store. And ever since the moment he saw them, it was of vital importance in his musical life. It was he who was the first to play a whole suite in a concert. And he studied and restudied these works for 13 years before he dared play them in the public, because he felt that they were so important and so wonderful. One of the basic works of Johann Sebastian, whom he had great admiration and respect already as a child.
Big event in his life.
Oh, it was, and continued to be throughout.
Didn't play them on this.
No, that was the first instrument that his father constructed for him, because when he was about 7 or 8 years old, he went to one of those village celebrations and heard a string quartet, and he fell in love with a cello. So he came back home saying he wanted to play a string instrument. And his father, after his insistence, said, well, I have no instrument, but I'll make you one. So he made him this gourd. He started immediately playing it like this, and played some tune, some...
It's hard to believe you can get a noise out of this, isn't it?
Not only that, but his father and the friends of his father were so touched at hearing him play some Ave Maria or some tune that he played at the time that it told them that it was serious. So the beginning of his cello career began with that gourd.
His mother was an indomitable woman. At the end, she'd had, I believe, 11 children, of whom 3 lived. Pablo Casals was the 3rd, I think, and then the last 2. So she clearly put her belief, her energy, everything into fostering his career, nurturing him, in the term we would now use. She was a very, very strong woman. Her husband always capitulated to her insistence on what was best for the son.
All my life, inspired by my mother, who was a wonderful, genial woman. She talked to me very early of my age about peace,
He was totally devoted to his mother. He respected her. He found that she was the most wise woman, the most intelligent, the most moral. I mean, he really had a very veneration for her, and it was actually she who discovered his talent in a way. I mean, his father had brought him to music. His father was a musician. But it was she who believed that he was a real talent, a world talent. And it was she who decided to come with him to Barcelona to go and study further. It was she who decided to bring him to Madrid. It was she who came with him to Paris with 2 little babies. And father always stayed home. So it was her strength and her belief in his talent that brought him to the great world of music.
one of the things which he told me was that when in his early days, he was so nervous walking on stage that he had to travel with his mother. And his mother was the one who actually pushed him on stage for each performance in his early years. And even later on, he was never a confident player, but once he had the cello on stage, he lost his fear.
His talent was recognized very quickly. And by the time he was 16 to 18, he was a protege of the Queen Regent of Spain with scholarship funds there. He was recognized from that point on. What was difficult from the time of his Paris debut, turn of the century, was the way he drove himself, the inner dynamics. But he began to make money by 1905 or so.
There's a story that Casals always believed that if you charged too much, people would always pay it. And his charges for his performances in the early 1900s were considerably in excess of what comparable artists were charging at the same time. And very, very infrequently did anyone question this. His earning power was very considerable, and he was able to invest enormous quantities of money in this house.
Casals apparently played tennis very, very well. Just before World War I, he won the musicians' tennis tournament. He won first prize.
Yeah, 1905, 6 years after on my first visit, he said, as frequent as you wish, this is your home. Mr. Casals invited me for a rest during the summer along the seaside in San Salvador. There came many visitors always. We were perhaps 12 persons, you see. We knew each other, you see. Every time I visited Pablo Casals, she was there. She was a great cellist with a great temperament. She had a magnificent technique.
Flamboyant, wonderful gowns on the stage. In fact, she inspired me with her gowns. I know very little, if nothing, about their lives together. I think that she was probably a student of his for a short time. I'm not quite sure about that yet, though.
There's a sense in which Sugio wanted an independent musical career, and there wasn't room in Casals' life for a companion who wanted independence of that sort. Casals, even from his earliest age, had never known a private world in which he wasn't the center of it. And with Sugio, that wasn't going to be possible, and they didn't have room for each other. almost on a rebound from the Suggia split. He married in 1914 in New York an American soprano, Susan Metcalf. It was an extraordinary marriage. They appeared not to have known each other very well, and it was never a very happy one. They were together for a few years, but split finally in 1928, and although they remained married until 1957, they didn't see each other, and they didn't spend time with each other. It was clearly a mistake and something he cared not to remember.
On board the liner Antilles, docking at Le Havre, the world-famous cellist Pablo Casals with Marta, his 21-year-old bride from Puerto Rico. There's the famous cello. The couple were on their way to Paris, where sprightly Senor Casals will prepare for the Puerto Rico Festival next year.
Well, I guess everybody was a little startled at the time, because it's not every day that someone 20 years old marries an 80-year-old. But as someone said at the time, he's not really 80 years old, neither is she 20 years old. It's ageless.
Moi, j'ai été témoin, et bien je sais que Martite a été très bonne pour le maître. Elle a été tonique au type Martite. Il venait de subir une peine énorme parce qu'il y avait 40 ans qu'ils habitaient avec Mme Capdeville, 40 ans d'amitié, de tendresse, tout ce qui se tisse au fil des ans. Hein? Donc il la perd. Il avait déjà beaucoup souffert pendant qu'elle était malade. Hein? Il la perd et bien, il a eu Martite là qui était là pour essayer de le distraire et qui a été extraordinaire. Elle était gaie, elle était intelligente, elle le soignait. C'était son infirmière, c'était sa secrétaire, c'était tout. C'était tout.
They were astonished that some young girl that came from Puerto Rico, an island that they didn't even know where it was, would come and with a cello and then eventually married the great maestro. Of course it was astonishing, but then after a couple of years, nobody thought about it anymore.
Don Pablo himself kept pointing out, Martita looks like my mother looked at her age. And he was intrigued also by the fact that Marta's mother was born in the same house in which his mother had been born in Mayhuez, on the same day of the month. Now, if that's full circle or what have you, it's just a small fact.
I don't think I'd go so far as to say that he was, in a way, marrying his mother. I think that's too Freudian a view. But the things that attracted him about his mother clearly attracted him in Marta as well, and there are many analogies. I think it's not surprising that someone who reminded him so closely of the most significant person in his life, his mother, should be one that he wanted to have around him, particularly in his old age.
The more we spoke about Puerto Rico, the more that, of course, we became fond of each other. He says, I must go to Puerto Rico. I must visit the land of my mother. So it was actually his mother's remembrance that brought him to Puerto Rico, and the fact that I was there, and I was from Puerto Rico. And as a matter of fact, many people, and he himself, said that I reminded him of his mother, my coloring, my face, my hair. Of course, all this was romantic in his mind.
Y mis versos le hablarán de un famoso catalán de madre puertorriqueña, un maestro que se empeña.
His mother left when she was 17 years old, and she always spoke about Puerto Rico and the way life was there, about the sea of Puerto Rico. So he always had a very fond affection for Puerto Rico, even though he had never been there. He had many relatives because his mother had brothers who had stayed in Puerto Rico, so there was a big De Fillo family in Puerto Rico. I knew that the maestro needed me in a sense that I could help him, that I became essential to his life in helping him and in doing correspondence and helping him in all sorts of things, and I love to be with him. And so it was a natural thing for me. It was nothing that I thought, should I do it or shouldn't I do it? Of course, when the moment came, and my parents were certainly not happy about my giving up, as they said, my life, at that particular moment, I said, well, it's the only thing I can do. It's what I have to do. And I went ahead and did it. So it was something that propelled me that I still, at this moment, don't understand because I was very young. And when I look back, it looks as though I have lived 2 or 3 lives already, and it's a wonderful privilege.
Muy bien. Solamente más pesado esto. Bom, 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 pero todo lo resto perfecto.
Marta was an enormously talented cellist. You know, she could have made an important career as a cellist, or as a singer, or as an actress, or what have you. And she continued to play, I think, early in the time they were married. But he, so far as I know, did not discourage her from playing. Life was just too busy at that point, I think, for her to pursue her career.
Well, the career I was mainly starting, but again, to decide at 20 years old to leave your music, to leave your parents, to leave everything, and just go ahead and be a part of the maestro's life, and a very secondary part, principal in a way, because I certainly became his wife, but certainly what I was there was to serve his ideals and to serve his needs. I did play as his soloist while he was conducting the Puerto Rico Symphony Orchestra, played a concerto with him, and we did play a little bit together for fun. But very soon I understood that I could not continue playing. First of all, I was too occupied by his activities. And again, being next to the greatest cellist in the world it was very inspiring, but I just couldn't sit there and practice for 2 or 3 hours. And you finally have to decide what you want to do. And I was very clear that what I wanted to do was to contribute to his life. And that's what I did.
It was a beautiful thing, and I think many of us feel that it's because of Marta that Casals lived the last 17 years of his life. He was a very fortunate man in many ways. Not only in addition to the relationship, he kept his marbles until what to go called total shipwreck, right at the end.
there's no more successful old age I can think of than Casals, keeping absolutely intact his image as the great anti-Franco Catalan patriot, standing for the values of democracy and liberty, refusing to, in fact, even the United States, he would appear on the United Nations territory, but not outside that in New York. But nonetheless, ending up in Puerto Rico with this wonderful girl, Martita.
I am a Catalan. Today, a province of Spain. But what has been Catalonia? Catalonia has been the greatest nation in the world. And I will play a short piece of the Catalonian folklore. This piece is called The Song of the Birds. The birds in the space sing peace, peace, peace. And the music is a music that Bach and Beethoven and all the greats would have loved and admired. It is so beautiful, and it is also the soul of my country, Catalonia.
my cello, that I have that play his cello more than half a century. Oh yes. And he's my companion. He's my companion. And I love him and he loves me. And yes, he loves me and he sounds well to make me happy. Yes,